Jack the Ripper was aptly named. He literally ripped.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most frightening patterns of behavior we've seen in serial killers.
I had these obsessive desires and thoughts wanting to control them.
Israel Keyes' extensive preparation. This homeschooled boy from Utah grew up to be a notoriously structured and methodical killer.
He was very meticulous, he was very organized, he definitely planned everything that he did.
Prior to his 2012 arrest, Keyes terrorized random citizens around the country, committing atrocities such as arson, robbery, and assault. In addition to a number of unconfirmed victims, Keyes is confirmed to have murdered on 2 separate occasions.
I would let them come to me. Just remote area. You go to a remote area that's not anywhere near where you live, but that other people go to as well.
First, he used a pre-prepared murder kit full of deadly paraphernalia to butcher a couple in Vermont. The following year, he killed an 18-year-old girl in Alaska and left her body in a shed for a week while he went on a cruise. When he returned, he put makeup on her corpse and posed it for ransom photos. Doesn't get much more cold-blooded than that.
We did spend a fair amount of time talking about his crimes and his offenses as well, and those times were definitely very chilling to hear him talk about what he has done.
The Boston Strangler stalkings. The case of this string of homicides, which bedeviled Boston in the early 1960s, has yet to be officially solved.
The Boston Strangler never broke down a door. He somehow managed to get himself welcomed, at least over the threshold.
The perpetrator is widely thought to be a man named Albert DeSalvo, but others believe that multiple people were behind the gruesome events. Whoever did commit the murders had some bizarre preoccupations, namely with women's hosiery.
It became obvious that these women were strangled, that there were sort of decorative bows tied around their necks. It really began to drift like a fog over the city that we had a killer loose in Boston.
After gaining entry into their homes, the Strangler asphyxiated his targets with their own stockings, as well as scarves, pillowcases, and other items, before tying the ligatures into an elaborate bow around their necks. This grotesque signature served as a chilling and decorative calling card.
It's very clear that the murderer is proud of his activity. He makes no effort, for example, to leave these women in places where they can retain their dignity.
Andrei Chikatilo's teaching career. Before becoming the so-called Butcher of Rostov, Chikatilo was a teacher in his native Soviet Union. He was eventually fired from the position after he assaulted multiple girls.
When they found some of the victims, you could still see the reflection of horror in their eyes. It was very hard to look at.
As if this behavior wasn't despicable enough, Chikatilo went on to develop a double life as a serial murderer, with his first kill taking place in 1978.
Despite clear evidence that a serial killer was on the loose, Soviet police and the Communist Party-controlled media refused to release any information. In the absence of real facts, rumors spread throughout the region.
Chikatilo's modus operandi involved luring children and susceptible women to isolated locations like forests or train stations, with the promise of money, chewing gum, or other prizes. After he killed his victims, he often mutilated parts of their bodies, even sometimes using his teeth.
It happened the next day after Chikatilo had been stopped on the platform. The body had all the typical injuries on it. The chief of police immediately demanded the files of any suspicious individuals who were registered in the last 24 hours.
It was a particularly disturbing calling card. Alexander Pushkin's hospitality. The chessboard killer was responsible for the deaths of at least 49 people between 1992 and 2006.
It was here, exactly at this place, where we found one of the victims. Of course, when we found him, it wasn't a pleasant sight.
As the moniker suggests, Pushkin had a passion for chess, but not just for playing the game. He apparently wanted to kill 64 people, as if to fill all the spaces on a chessboard. To reach this twisted objective, he would invite visitors of Bitsa Park in Moscow to take a stroll and share a drink.
The killer didn't leave any trace. We tried to pick up different objects from the crime scene, but our analysis didn't show any trace. No fingerprints, nothing. He operated very, very carefully.
From there, Pushkin would strike them in the head with a blunt object, frequently leaving his mark by shoving sticks or vodka bottles into their skulls. Although Pushkin didn't meet his quota, he certainly made a name for himself as one of Russia's most heartless criminals.
When he confessed, it was a complete shock for everyone because it's an enormous, enormous figure.
Karl Denke's dark cravings. Denke took the term predator to new extremes. He was well-liked in his small Prussian community, where he worked as a church organist and operated a shop that sold meat and leather. But little did his neighbors suspect the true origin of his wares. Beginning in 1903, Denke, or Papa as the townsfolk called him, bludgeoned at least 30 people to death before processing the flesh into preserved meats, as well as belts, shoelaces, and more. He's frequently called the Forgotten Cannibal due to the fact that he received very little media attention. We're not sure why he isn't better known, but perhaps it's because the story of a butcher selling human remains is one most would rather not remember. Keith Hunter Jesperson's Happy Faces. This Canadian-born truck driver not only killed at least 8 American women, but managed to sully one of the most wholesome images ever created while doing it.
He's not getting the recognition that he feels he deserves, especially around that smiley face moniker that he's crafted. He probably thought that was a brilliant kind of brand identity, and nobody's picking it up.
Jesperson went after vulnerable individuals like sex workers or people living on the street, securing them in his vehicle before strangling and in many cases assaulting them. He later wrote a confession on a truck stop bathroom wall, as well as various letters detailing the nature of his crimes.
And at first, this would appear to be quite compelling, but it wasn't new information. It was information that anybody could have heard and just repeated onto the wall. So I think this was a desire for recognition on Jesperson's part. It was a desire to be noticed.
He signed all of these with the popular smiley icon. Jesperson's use of the happy face became a sinister trademark, revealing his pleasure in his bloodshed and his desire for attention.
Jesperson says he started drawing the smiley face symbol to tempt investigators into tracking him.
Ted Bundy's deceit. Bundy is often thought of as the quintessential serial killer.
Ted Bundy was one of the most prolific and violent serial killers in American history. The psychopath with movie star good looks would prove to the world that not even jail could contain his murderous obsession.
And this isn't just due to the brutality of his carnage. It's also because of his ability to lie seamlessly and gain young women's trust. Bundy would use his charm and good looks to appear friendly, frequently feigning injury by wearing a sling or cast and/or pretending to need help.
That's the thing, that Ted Bundy's victims were good people, upstanding college girls who were willing to be helpful.
He'd exploit his prey's empathy to lure them into his car, where he would proceed to savagely take their lives. Often, Bundy would revisit the crime scenes to, let's say, interact with the decomposing bodies. This master manipulator planned and calculated every step of his crimes, causing many to consider him the most organized killer in history.
Everything we know about serial killers was turned on its head when we saw that he wasn't the creepy man in the raincoat, but he was the law student, the handsome guy in the polo shirt, the guy driving the little car. He can be a murderer too.
Jeffrey Dahmer's Memorials. Dahmer is a name even the most casual true crime fans have heard, and it's clear why. Few killers have matched his level of sociopathy.
Jeffrey Dahmer was responsible for killing more than a dozen people. The majority of those murders happened in an apartment near the Marquette campus.
He would strangle those he caught in his trap and meticulously dismember their bodies. But as callous as Dahmer was, he actually held his victims in a strangely high regard, like a hunter and his trophies.
He also said that there was an element of wanting to make these people a part of him, so they would be with him forever.
He preserved skulls, bones, and other body parts, often bleaching or painting them, and arranged them in his apartment as a way to relive his crimes. His ultimate goal was to create an altar of skulls, a shrine to his macabre desires.
Hearing about that is the stuff of horror movies.
Gans Crafts. This lonely grave robber had an interesting way of expressing his creativity.
The twisted killer was a quiet loner named Ed Gein. Hidden inside the 51-year-old's rural farmhouse was a ghoulish treasure trove.
Also known as the Butcher of Plainfield and the Plainfield Ghoul, Gein murdered 2 middle-aged women and exhumed various corpses, creating dark trinkets out of their remains. When police arrived at the scene of Gein's crimes, they found some truly nightmarish things. from lampshades made of human skin to decorations made of skulls.
He was such a little person that I found it hard to picture him as the person who'd committed all these homicides. He lived there very peacefully. He never caused any problems.
Gein's obsession with his mother adds another layer of horrifying to his story. His gruesome deeds have inspired several fictional villains, including Norman Bates from Psycho and Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's told.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Jack the Ripper's MO. It's likely that this Victorian-era case will remain a mystery for years to come.
In the autumn of 1888, the East End of London lived in terror.
But the Ripper's obsession with mutilation links at least 5 victims together. In each of these cases, those murdered, all of whom were impoverished sex workers, were savagely butchered, with their organs missing or haphazardly strewn about the scene.
They were under a lot of pressure to solve these cases, identify this individual.
Investigators received 4 cryptic, taunting letters from someone claiming to be the killer. One of these notes came with a severed ear, and another with a human kidney. Saucy Jack's visceral murders, as well as his talent for evading capture, cement him as one of the most diabolical real-life villains in history.
So Jack the Ripper is a phenomenon, and he's a phenomenon that is set to continue because we still cannot identify who this man might have been.
Which of these rituals do you find the most bizarre? Let's discuss in the comments.
The word is that both you and Seattle police are proceeding on the assumption that there are more bodies out here.